So I want to sort of, in a way, just start with a feeling approach rather than a technical approach to meditation. I mean, as you know, you probably have seen on things on TV or film, meditation is a really big part of traditional Buddhism. And all the different cultural Buddhisms do it very, very differently. So if you take Japan, I mean, they have different meditation schools in Japan, and they're all different, actually. But the one that's most famous is Zen. And just to give you a feel of differences. So when I was 19, I really wanted to meditate. So I went to Japan. I took boats and planes and overland. And I went to Japan, and I found myself in a very famous Zen, Soto Zen temple complex in Kyoto, where I stayed for nearly a year. And in a funny kind of way, surprisingly and unusually, it was a bit like one of our centres. It had the more experienced people, who was the master, who actually was really famous, and then the abbot, who was relatively famous, and then all the monks, there were 8 of them, and then you get the local neighbourhood people. And the local neighbourhood people would come in and join activities when they could. And the monks put on meditation for 3 hours in the morning before breakfast. So that's what I did. I just jumped in from nothing to 3 hours that first week. And there were, people of all ages coming from the neighbourhood. It wasn't just the old retired folk, it was young as well. We'd have 50 minutes sit, walking, 50 minutes sit, walking, 50 minutes, and then we'd have breakfast together, and then people go to work. So we start at 5:30. And no one told me anything. I mean, I didn't speak Japanese, and the monks didn't speak English, but there was an American guy who could theoretically translate. And when I said, look, ask them, what should I do? They say, one of them, the monks, very kind of like, it was perfunctory, really. He just said, I'll get him to focus on the breath at first, and then emptiness. And then he walked off. And that was it, actually, that was my instructions for about 6 months. But then the monks decided that there were enough Westerners there to warrant doing what they called a sesshin, which is a retreat, really, for a weekend. So they asked me if I wanted to go, and I said yes. I didn't actually ask, what does it mean? I didn't find out till we arrived it was 14 hours a day of practice, with no instruction. So we'd sit for 50, walk, and then we'd have a little break, and then come back, boom, 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 all through the day. And at the end of the day, I thought, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I just love this. I didn't know what I was doing, and my knees ached, wicked. But I just absolutely loved it. So that's just to give you a sense. And then they sort of said, oh, just be open to, open dimension of space. And that was it. That was it. That was my instruction for nearly a year. So it's very, very different from then. My next teacher was from Thailand. Same, it's Buddhist, very technical. Breathing in like 4 or 5 different speeds with different rates of counting. So it's really different, really focused. I'm really focused on psychology of the mind. It gives me a headache just thinking of it, actually. But I'm just telling you this just to show that there are lots of different ways that meditation is practiced within the Buddhist world. So within what I would call Western Buddhism in our centres, where what we do is we take, what I like to think of it, we take the best. That's what I really think we do. Because our teacher, the man who started this movement, II Vajradaka, he'd lived in the East, he'd done lots of practice, he'd had lots of really good teachers in all the range of different cultural styles, and he basically cherry-picked. And I have to say, when I came back to the West and I met it, I just thought, this is brilliant. This is really fantastic. He's right on the button here. He has really got it right. That was after practicing in a number, including Tibetan schools, for a bit. And then I just stuck, really, with this because I really felt that it was progressive and it was complete and whole approach. So, very, very generally, when you come to classes, you learn two techniques, mindfulness of breathing and a metta bhavana. And those two things develop particular primary skills of meditation. So the mindfulness of breathing, including the skills which we were using earlier, helps you to become sensitive to yourself, to arrive and to become absorbed. I prefer that word to concentrated. You become absorbed. And so that is an aspect or an element of meditation, that your frittering mind calms down, or flitting mind calms down, and you settle, and as it were, your body and your mind come together, and you come into a new way of experiencing yourself, which is characterized by the word absorption. Everything is lighter, more open, and from a certain point of view, you have more, I don't like the word control, but you have more control. You can say, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do that. When you're absorbed, you have that ability to go, I'm going to do this, and do it. And you can say, oh, I'm going to calm, settle, stay, and it works when you're in that absorbed state. So the mindfulness of breathing and the skills of it help you come into this experiencing the potentiality of your mind. You know, oh, there's happiness here. Just stay with that. Follow that. Let that deepen. And then you can do it. So when you're starting, you're learning how to check, clear, and come back. And you're doing that usually quite a lot till you get to this point of absorption. And then you could say, in a certain way, you're actually meditating. That is, you're in it then. You're in the meditation realm, you could say. I mean, theoretically, technically, verbally, you're meditating when you're checking, clearing, and coming back. But the actual experience of being in that richer state of mind where everything comes together and it feels very light and open and happy, that is meditating. So the mindfulness of breathing gives you that range, the learning how to deal with the mind and coming into absorption. The metta bhavana, or the development of loving kindness, is, I like to think of it as the flavour of the mind. So the flavour is benign and kind and warm and friendly and wishing well and wanting the best for oneself and others. It's some very, very positive flavour of mind. Yeah? And it's a primary, in Buddhism generally, and particularly within these centres, it's considered to be the primary positive state. So you've in a way already started to deal with it in the mindfulness of breathing, when you, like we had to deal with being a bit hard on yourself, letting that go. You're already pointing in the direction of being kind to yourself. But the metta bhavana practice itself really, it just focuses on that. That's all that it's about, the wishing well for someone, their health, their well-being, their spiritual development, their social life. You really hope that things go well when you bring people to mind when you're doing this meditation. And so there's a very sort of rich, positive, pervasive quality in the meditation. So now you sort of bring them both together. You have the absorption and the ability to choose what you want to do with the flavour, the positive flavour of kindness. And yes, the two meditations are done separately, usually. You do one, and then you do another time you do the other. But over time, you start to get the sense of how they come together. That there are elements of the kindness in the way you focus on the breath. The quality is there. There's a richness of positivity. And that when you're doing the metta bhavana, there's an element of really being able to come in close to the experience, go to the experience and stay with it and let it fill you. So you have the absorption element there. So that's a sort of foundation that we lay. And this foundation and these two approaches allow for just being a sort of, in a way, awareness that is just taking in what is going on without attempting to do anything particular. Sometimes it's called just sitting, or being present or alive to your experience. But very often we do this at the beginning of a meditation, just to take it to arrive, and at the end of a mindfulness of breathing or a metta bhavana. So you're in a way experiencing and enjoying the fruits of what you've done. There's momentum. Your mind has started to kind of become at ease, and you, as it were, enjoy that. There's a sense of flow. You enjoy it. There's a sense of expansion. You enjoy it. It's just a taking in, rather than, I'm going to focus on the breath, or I'm going to focus on kindness. And in that sort of more open, non-specific kind of awareness, things may emerge. It's sort of qualities of awareness of how things change, for example. So this leads into one of the other kind of primary trainings, which is wisdom. The meditation primes the mind for you to be clear about how things are, what's going on. And that's why very often we do the meditation first, in our lives. And then we bring in reflection on how things change, for example. So there's a particular aspect of meditation which brings these two together. So I just want to talk about that. So on the basis of what I've said already, let's say it sounds like I'm hypnotically dropping in a suggestion here. You take a morning and you're going to just do a bit more meditation than you usually do, and you do a bit of some mindfulness breathing. You settle, you calm, you get quite still, and then you bring in that richness of the kindness. And then after that, you, as it were, you might go for a cup of tea or just stretch the legs, and then you just sit. But you keep that sense of absorption and the richness of the kindness. And this is where the experience of meditation, of being in that richness and awareness of how things are, comes together. You start to recognize or notice that if you stay with a quality of kindness, it grows. And in Buddhism, this is a sort of universal truth, that if you have a certain state and you stay with it, it will grow. And that, in the context of the meditation, can be a very direct experience. So you notice that you do feel care and you stay with it, and then it's deeper and richer. And it's happened, and you're in it, and then you go, it developed and went deeper because I stayed with it. So this sort of being aware of how something changes when you stay with it is, in a way, quite insightful. And it can change your life. So it gives you an awareness of a truth, in a way, that if you stay with something, a positive thing, or a state of absorption, or a state of reflection, or a creative process, it gets deeper, richer, and it also develops similar kinds of things. So an example of that is, say you've got the quality of care and kindness and being for somebody. That can then quite naturally inculcate a quality of appreciation of them. So you've got two things, as it were. To put it simply, you probably have more, but you have the care for them, but you also have the appreciation of them. They make an effort. They deal with their difficulties. You really appreciate that. They're really honest. So you care for them and you appreciate them. And the point here is that it's not necessarily developed separately. I mean, there are meditations for developing it separately, but they actually come all out of just the basic kindness. And very often it just will naturally grow, spontaneously grow. The appreciation will grow. And this quality of appreciation of positive things in people is considered to be really important in Buddhism. It's important in everyday life, in social engagement, but also very important as a deeper state, rather than constantly going to finding fault. Yeah, they're all right, but they always spill their tea in the saucer. It's horrible. I hate it. Obviously, it's a silly example, but you see what I mean. So this sort of appreciation moves from nitpicking, fault-finding, to something which is actually taking in that people can grow and develop, and you can be in empathy with that, because you're growing and developing. You're actually doing it. When you meditate, you're growing and developing. And then when you see other people come to the class and they're doing it, they're paying attention, there can be a real gladness that they're making the effort, they're turning up and doing it, and it's it's staying with that. I'm saying it's brilliant. It is brilliant. Staying with it, it grows. Yeah. So here, this staying with a positive, absorbed state of mind gives you a real choice. What direction are you going to go in? And what are you going to do with it? So there are meditations, for example, that we do on developing compassion for people who are having a hard time, of which, these current times there are a lot. So the kindness is, as it were, pointed in the direction of compassion and care for people having a hard time, and working with those thoughts, if you have them, well, they deserve it anyway. Letting go of that and so that your whole richness of care and kindness, appreciation, gladness of the efforts that people make, and caring when people suffer, by staying with it, it all grows and deepens. And it doesn't just deepen within the meditation, but it deepens in your life. There's a residue that goes from one meditation to another, which is great. So this is partly why meditation is considered so important. It puts you in touch in a very profound and deep way with awareness, connectedness, positivity, and connectedness with others and the world. And I think it's worth mentioning that, because there used to be this sort of, I think, very cynical view, he's a meditator, he's just navel gazing. That's ridiculous. It's never that. It's never just that. It's ignorant, basically. By paying attention and becoming sensitive to these qualities, you become more sensitive and connected to others. And with each other, even in the room. We were talking a bit about that. You can feel the connection sometimes, just in the class. And it's a wonderful thing, because it overcomes all kinds of bias and all kinds of tendency of criticism of type. He's tall, I don't like tall people. So that's a sort of very fundamental approach that we're taking in these classes. We're building up skill sets with these two meditations that we teach, or other people will teach in the classes. I tend more just to go for the skills. You'll get used to that after a while. So we started at the beginning with the clear intention to focus on the breath and the body, and to bring in the 3 C's. Anyone remember what the 3 C's are?
Check, clear, come back.
Ta-da! Thank you. Check, clear, and come back. So what this does is that it works with the more grosser tendencies of the mind to be scattered and to go off on one. I just love that term, don't you? He's going off on one. They're off on one. And you can tell when someone is going off on one, you say something, or someone says something, and they start to go, but what do you mean? How dare you say that? That's ridiculous. No, I didn't mean that. But you did, and then they're off. So that can happen externally, of course, but it can also happen internally. You know, how dare they do that, not give me their seat, me at my age, you know, it can, and you're away. So the three C's guard you against all of that going off on one, including anxiety. Which, you know, in our day and age and time is such an important thing to be aware of and guard against. Because there's so much of it about, you know. Will I, won't I, shall I, shan't I, you know, will they, are they, aren't they, will they catch it, not catch it, you know, what have they got, you know. There's so much anxiety about it, so we can have sensible caution, of course, being a bit more kind of in the moment. However, we need to watch for what it feels like when we get anxious. Check it, say, I love you, but that's ridiculous. This is you talking to yourself. I love you. It's ridiculous. Let go of that. Just come back and do the sensible thing. And in that way, you can get absorbed. If you don't do that, it's really difficult to get absorbed. It's just a fact. So you have to put the work in. It's a training. Comes back to that wonderful word. It's you train yourself in the three C's. You train yourself in going to the breath or the kindness and staying with it, letting it grow, becoming absorbed, staying with it. Then, when you're in one of your morning meditation periods, or if you go on retreat, another hypnotic suggestion, when you go on retreat, and you have more time just to meditate, a different kind of checking and adjusting happens. Now I want to mention this in a way for everybody, but it's more for the people who are really experienced. So I'm just going to say a little bit. So if you're absolutely new, you can go just sort of as it were, just sort of plant this as a memory. Oh yes, he was talking about that. Now I get it. Now this is the time for that. So when you start to get absorbed and you're really engaged in this more subtle flow of mind and awareness on the breath or the quality of kindness, there's this thing called sinking and drifting, or I like to call it proliferation. So you're with the experience of the mind and it feels rich and calm and full of energy and enjoyable, and you're clear, and then you notice that you're starting to sink away from it. So it's not that you're falling asleep, it's much more subtle than that. You're sort of going into sucking on to a mint syndrome. You're not so present anymore. You're just sort of, you're in the glow of the experience, but you're not in it. And this is, you know what I mean? It's when you notice it, you think, no, I'm not going to get into just basking in the glow. I'm going to be in it. I'm going to stay with the experience. So you come back. So there is a checking and adjusting here, but it's on a much, much more subtle level, where I'm just basking. Come back. Because basking falls into sleep, usually. So there's that. It's very, very gentle. I'm falling away, come back. Falling away, come back. Vivid, stay, open, feel the intensity. Then, with the intensity, because sometimes meditation, it's not just about being calm and tranquil and laid back. It can be very intense. And you have to get used to that. Because some people, nearly, perhaps everybody at a certain point, find it quite uncomfortable to have so much intensity that isn't the kind of intensity that you know, that you're familiar with. It's a different kind of intensity. It's an intensity of the richness of the mind arriving and saying, here I am. And you have to go, ooh! You have to get used to it. And that's the term. You have to get he's given me, I've got another 5 minutes. No? You have to get used to the intensity. And this is really good. You just say to get used to it. Just get used to it. So you don't fight or run away from the intensity. It grows. But what happens is that your mind can then be more excited and it starts to proliferate into other things, which is called drifting, but it's more like proliferating. It goes to other things, and you have to watch for that, and you have to come back to the intensity or the stillness or the calmness. You keep coming back. So one way is dropping off, and the other is through the excitement. So the calmness makes you sink, and the intensity makes you drift. And you have to, as it were, bring them together and just keep the calmness and the intensity, the happiness to be, and the energy and the delight of it all together.